So before we get into different types of thinking, I want to bring up that you talk about sheep and cattle and all sorts of animals. We're really big on getting into year-round grazing and utilizing annuals. And we've noticed that sheep, if we're trying to get them into graze something that's taller than they are, like a sorghum,
Okay.
they'll stay on the outside because they don't want to go into the unknown.
Well, also they can't see.
Right.
They go into a thicket of a crop. They can't see.
So they're going to stay on the edge.
You know, and they eat on the edge. And of course, cattle are tall enough that they're going to go into that.
Now, if it's taller than the cattle, they'll probably back off too. Wouldn't
Probably. Most crops aren't, aren't taller than the cattle when you're grazing them.
they? Right. But they could be if you got carried away. And so you got to think about that too, what they can see and sense and
Well, I'm a
such.
big fan of rotational grazing. I know they're doing some very, very good work here in Missouri. I wrote a paper 2 years ago reviewing literature on rotational grazing and on grazing cover crops because I got sick and tired of cattle being bashed as environmental wreckers. Where you're grazing animal may be part of the solution. You can improve soil health with grazing animals.
Right. Through this management. And you also mentioned solar panels can be used for livestock.
Well, you have to put them high enough off the ground because sheep touch the edge of a solar panel, they will break it. So it has to be mounted far enough off the ground that they can't rub on it. And you also need to space them far enough apart so some grass can grow under it. Now, I did see a set of solar panels coming in here from the airport in St. Louis that was spaced right, but nothing was grazing in it. But we need to be using the land under solar panels. There's nothing I hate more than these solar panels that are too close to the ground, too close. You can't possibly graze anything under it. We need to be using the land under the solar panels. And you just mount them a little higher and a little further apart, then you can graze under them.
Because that's a win-win. It helps the animal
That's
because
right.
it provides some shade, for example.
Yeah, that's right.
And the forage they're consuming, most forages like a little shade.
Well, yeah.
Cool season grasses, for example, and legumes. So it can be a big benefit to the producer.
But we got so many fields full of solar panels that are too close to the ground and they're spaced way too close together.
So that's something new coming down the pipes that we can do. All right. You also, before we go, genetics. You made several comments about how if we breed for one trait, overbreed, we can destroy the other ones.
You're going to wreck your animal because what's happening right now is congestive heart failure, especially in Angus cattle. We're breeding so much for meat, so much for marbling, fattening at a younger age, that the congestive heart failure has gradually crept up. And some of my research colleagues at Colorado State University did research showed that it's associated with meat traits, and it's also associated with certain sires. And that's an example of going too far. And the congestive heart failure has slowly gotten worse. See, it used to be that was only a high altitude problem. That's what it used to be. And then another issue we're getting is crooked toes. And that's getting worse. I had a veterinarian send me a picture of a 4-month-old red Angus heifer that had claws that looked like this at 4 months old and had only eaten grass and mother's milk. That's a genetic defect. And I've seen a lot of the beef on dairy steers with crossed toes. No, we need to be selecting for decent feet and legs because a survey that was done probably about 2 years ago now showed that 8% of the fat cattle, the fed feedlot beef coming into the big plants, the cattle were lame. And most of that's genetic.
Wow.
That's not okay.
No.
That's not okay. That's not a good thing.
No.
One plant was horrible at 32%.
Wow.
No, this is just disgusting. Fed beef, because I can remember 15 years ago when the amount of lame cattle you had of fed beef was just about zero.
But only in 15 years we went up.
That's right.
Wow.
I've been in the industry a long time, and I'm worried that we've got young people coming in now that are going to think that's normal. You see, that's bad becoming normal.
Wow. And you even mentioned the livers issues.
Oh, liver abscesses have gotten worse, and some of this is feed related. They've got some feed yards that like to feed 95% grain and then grind the hay up about that long. And I call that feeding pig feed to cattle. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have liver abscesses. And that's gotten worse. And one of my students was a meat inspector for about 7 months. And he said the day shift on a fed beef plant would be 80-90% good livers. And the night shift, they bring all this stuff in that they fed really terrible, will be 80% condemned livers. Throw the livers away.
Wow. And that's genetics, but also just bad feeding.
Well, some of that's more bad feeding. The lameness is mostly genetics. Mm-hmm. You know, it's showing up in really young animals.
Are we seeing this improvement more in the large producers or the small producers or both?
Well, it's certain semen is spreading this stuff around. I just got back from a trip to Argentina, and I think I saw some of the results of some of our semen being shipped down there at the local beef plant. I was not happy about that.
Because it's producing a product of the.
But we've got to not be breeding bad feet in the
Yes.
legs. See, I kind of like to look at genetic selection like a national budget. And a national budget has got the economy, meat, milk, or eggs. Mm-hmm. Now, if I put all my emphasis into the economy, I'm going to shortchange the infrastructure. That's going to be feet and legs and heart. Also, reproduction. And the highest producers, dairy cows, have the worst first AI service pregnancy rate. Mm. And then what's happening to our immune system, our military? What are we doing to that? I don't know. Everything takes energy. But what some people that are really forward-thinking are learning is that on some of these things, if you back off just a little tiny bit, like on chicken, for example, if you back off maybe 2% breast meat, you're actually going to come out ahead because you're going to have less deaths. You see, we have to start looking at what's optimal production. Mm-hmm. And having a lot of crooked feet, that's not okay.
Right. Or premature deaths.
Yeah.
You mentioned that some of them are dying a month or a week before they go to the market.
Well, this is what's happening with some of these cattle.
Yes.
And I talked to a feeder in Colorado. He feeds beef on dairy, which is Angus semen bred to dairy cows. And they were able to find that a single sire was related to a lot of heart failure because there were certain steers that would roll over and die shortly before slaughter. Traced it back to a single bull. They eliminated that semen, and the problem went away.
And the beef on dairy is a good thing that you have a market now for these dairy bulls.
Well, I think
and steers.
One thing that's good is now the bull calf, dairy calf, is worth something. Mm-hmm. That is good. And you're going to get rid of the really horrid Bob Veal market, slaughtering baby calves. I worked on that in the 80s. There's no way to handle. I hate Bob Veal plants. Mm-hmm. And now there were a lot of Holstein steers that were being fed out. But now the beef on dairy, you now have a certified Angus steer. And a recent report I read in a veterinary magazine showed that it was about 23% of the fed beef now is beef on dairy.
Really?
So you're making that bull calf worth money. That's good. That's a real good thing. But the thing I'm worried about is your regular ranch calf, like you raise here in Missouri, spends 3/4 of its life on pasture, and then just the last part of its life on grain. But the beef on dairy calves, they'll put them. I've seen pictures, place where they send them to, miles and miles of calf hutches, and then when they get a bit bigger, they go in a feed yard. They probably get no pasture.
So never are on pasture.
They're never on pasture.
Oh, wow.
Never on pasture. And that would be the downside.
Because them on pasture has some good qualities.
Well, raise the little calves in hutches. You can't raise them somewhere that's going to be muddy. So there are places like in New Mexico, some place that stays really dry, and then you're draining the aquifer. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
the environmental issues.
Yeah, that's not so hot. We need to be figuring out maybe they be taken to pasture.
Yeah. So why couldn't we take those?
Well, we need to be we need to get innovative people. What I have found is little people innovate. I don't care what field you're in. I can remember when probiotics in chicken industry was looked at like nonsense. Well, then 15 years later, at the trade show, there were giant banners hanging down advertising probiotics. But that's an example of something that little people started.
Well, like this year-round grazing.
Yeah.
That's the small producers selling.
Small producers and little guys innovate, even in the electronics industry. ChatGPT was a small company. Facebook started in a dorm room. Google started surplus computer parts. Little people innovate.
One of the major equipment companies told me, we don't develop technology, we buy it.
They're absolutely right. No, they're absolutely right. And even the first basic program for artificial intelligence was done by a graduate student who never got his PhD. And 2 graphics computer boards were bought on Amazon for $500 or something like that, and just did it at home. Paper has 20,000 citations.
To put that in perspective,
one little guy.
To put that in perspective, we got so excited because we had one that had 180. We thought, man, we have reached a lot of people, but 20,000 is just unheard of.
20,000 academic citations.
Yes. That means that's a lot.
On an academic paper. And I looked at the paper. I don't understand the programming, but I Wired or one of these magazines, I read the whole story about him. Some kid in his home, electronics he bought off of Amazon, and then I typed in the name of the circuit, and then they tried to sell them to me.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't really want to buy them. $540 now, but it was a total new way of looking at programming, and this kid figured it out.
Wow, that's great. Well, so that kind of leads us into visual thinking. People think
that's
differently.
Right. And that's my new book, Visual Thinking, The Hidden Gifts of People Who Think in Pictures, Patterns, and Abstractions. I'm what's called an object visualizer. Everything I think about is a picture. Okay, well, I was just over at the meeting and we were talking about apples, and now I'm seeing the rack where the apples are in the grocery store. I'm seeing apples in my refrigerator. That's a picture. Now, another kind of thinking is your mathematical pattern thinking. And then you have word thinking. Now, the visual thinkers like me, what we're good at is animals, because animals live in a sensory-based world. Also really good at mechanical things. When I was out working in construction, installing equipment like center track restrainer systems, 80s, early 90s, I worked with a lot of shop people that could not do algebra, could not do higher math. I'm one of those 2 that can't do higher math. Mm-hmm. I majored in psychology to dodge the math classes. But they were inventing all kinds of mechanical devices and patenting those mechanical devices. So the object visualizers, terrible at higher math like algebra, good with animals, photography, art, and mechanical. Art and mechanical go together. And I'm very concerned that my kind of thinker is being screened out. We need them to fix things. Elevators are not getting serviced. The people I worked with have all retired. You need my kind of thinking.
Well, I just saw a headline, the Gen Z, I think it's just the Gen Z generation will be the tool belt generation because they're more going into the trades.
Well, I think there's some, but they have to be exposed to it in school. See, the problem we've got is you've got kids growing up today without shop classes.
Right.
They've got to get exposed, because I had a student in my class 2 years ago who had never used a tape measure or a ruler to measure anything in her life. I'm seeing too many of these younger students totally removed from the world of practical things. Now, your mathematics mind is music and patterns, music and math. Now, in building a big food plant, there's a very interesting division of the labor. The people I work with make all the clever mechanical equipment. We don't touch boilers and refrigeration. We don't understand that. That requires the mathematical mind. And I've seen that division of labor in all the different places. And I'm looking at this mess right now with Starliner, stuck valves in the thruster system. Did somebody not put the stuff together right? You see that? The rockets, I guess, are complicated, but actually the thruster systems are fairly simple. And that valve has to work when the computer tells it to work, to move. And in my book, I discuss how the Fukushima nuclear power plant accident was a visual thinking mistake. The mathematicians did a wonderful job of making it earthquake-proof. But 20 minutes later, the tsunami went over the seawall, flooded the site, and drowned the electric emergency cooling pump. A pump you really need that's not going to run underwater. And if they'd put in waterproof doors, it would not have happened. Simple, old-fashioned waterproof doors. And I've talked to mathematical engineers about this. I said, would you have seen that? No, they don't see it. Mm-hmm. And then when I looked up the historical information, a 10-meter seawall is going to get breached. And now I'm visualizing if this is the seawall, okay, the water comes over it, now you're going to get it puddle against the wall like this. Guaranteed to break the doors. You see, I see that. That's a mistake I would not have made.
So that's why we need all different types of things.
We need them, and we need them in complementary manners. Like when we wrote this book, I did the rough drafts. They're kind of disorganized because I'm an associational thinker. Betsy Lerner, my verbal co-author, she smoothed them all out. But the thing that verbal thinkers tend to do is they tend to overgeneralize. They'll have a big concept. Okay, all right, we need to do more grazing. All right, that might be an example of big concept. But how do we implement it? Because in this part of Missouri, you may need to do it in a different way than in another part of the country. You see, there's specific things you need to do to make it to work.
And there's a third type of thing.
Verbal.
Word.
Word. People that think in words. And people that think in words are much more organized, but they leave out too much information. You know, they have a big concept like, okay, how do we make the classroom better for autistic kids? Mm-hmm. Well, I'm thinking about let's get rid of the LED lights that flicker, and you can test them with slow motion video on your phone. Get bullying under control and teasing under control. And the other thing is that I have problems with is I cannot remember long sequential verbal information. So give me a pilot's checklist of how to do the chemistry experiment, so I can put the steps down in bullet points. Very, very simple accommodation that would really help me not have to be told 5 times how to do something.
Sure.
Those are very simple accommodations, but those are specific. Those are probably the top 3 right there. Mm-hmm. That's the top 3. If you just did those 3, probably fix 80% of it.
Right.
But you see, that's bottom-up thinking. And I take the same approach to animal welfare evaluation. Okay, out on a ranch, body condition, lameness. Okay, if you're in a feed yard, dirtiness. You know, those are things that I can measure.
Mm-hmm. So our education system is looking at what now instead?
Well, right now it seems like they're putting more and more math in, and that would just screen me out. The other problem I'm seeing, and this is not good with our math kids, I just heard another complaint today, and then I heard 3 other complaints just a few months ago of an elementary school, 3rd and 4th graders be turning into behavior problems because they're super good at math and they're bored with little baby math and they need to be moved ahead, and they're not being moved ahead. I'm not suggesting putting a 9-year-old in high school. No, just bring in the math books and let him work on them there in the classroom or work on an online program. No, this is just ridiculous.
So how about creativity and imagination? Where does that lie into all this?
Well, this is why a lot of schools are taking out hands-on classes, and this has caused problems with not going into the skilled trades, because a lot of kids that ought to be going into skilled trades are playing video games in the basement. Then because they're in special ed, they said they can't take shop classes. Well, in my generation, I spent 20 years or more working with people that were definitely autistic, owned metalworking shops. In my generation, special ed kids owned the shops.
Or now they're called special ed kids.
Yeah, they weren't called special ed kids back then. They'd call them other names. Mm-hmm. But I worked with people that were brilliant at designing mechanical equipment that were definitely autistic. But they had grown up working on cars or had welding classes in high school. You see, and we also need to be tinkering and building stuff when they're younger. I did 2 books to get kids off the devices: Outdoor Scientist, Calling All Minds. And Calling All Minds, it profiles famous inventors. But I also have some of my childhood projects. I spent hours trying to figure out how to make a little bird kite work. Kids aren't doing these kind of things today.
Are they spending too much time then on the phone or their tablet and not?
Well, we need to be getting kids doing more real things. And I read a very interesting article about the internet being introduced to indigenous people in the Amazon. And the tribal elders go, yeah, we want to keep the internet, but we're going to have to turn it off for most of the day because we got to get the kids off the phones.
Right.
They immediately recognized that was going to be a problem.
Could
But
they
they don't want to get rid of the internet because they had
Right.
too many other things they needed it for. But it's going to be off for a good part of the day. We're going to just turn it off.
You know, one of the things I've always noticed here in the agriculture, if you look at really successful scientists in ag, so many of them came from dairy farms. I just think they had to improvise, they had to learn, they had hard work was part of it.
That's right.
And just they learned that from the very beginning.
But what I'm worried about now in science is we're getting too much, you got to use the fanciest statistics program.
Oh yeah.
Or reviewing a literature with mathematical algorithms. But what I'm seeing in the method sections of papers, as a visual thinker, I go, wait a minute, you didn't tell me what you fed your chickens. That matters in a meat quality experiment. You didn't tell me how they were housed. You didn't tell me how you did a certain procedure. Okay, if it's a survey, how did you define your sample? They're doing all this fancy math, but they're leaving all kinds of important stuff out of the method section that will make the study impossible to replicate unless you put that information in there.
And you get so involved in the mathematics part of it, you don't do creativity on your study.
Well, the other thing is there's a thing where they kind of think observation is not part of science. I mean, even back when I was getting my PhD in the 80s, I used to fight with my professor about this. And I said, what about the Hubble Space Telescope? What's the control? Do you point it at the ground? No, seriously. The Space Telescope is strictly observation.
Yeah. And you mentioned how we need to observe how the animals are working.
Yeah.
I mean, what are they doing when they see something? They stop. Why?
Well, and then let's go back to the cattle handling. Let's say they stop at a drain in the floor, or they stop at a shadow. So the animal's going to put its head down. Wait until the head comes back up before you try to push them. Don't just shove them up into that. And then in new facilities, you want to try to make the flooring all the same. Let's say you're going from dirt to concrete. Just scuff some dirt up on the concrete so it's not such a distinct line. I remember one time going into a facility and they'd put shavings down, and there was a very distinct line between the light-colored shavings and the dirt, and I just went out there with my shoes and scuffed it. And then the cattle went over it, because it wasn't a distinct line anymore.
Right. So they have that same visualization as many of us do.
Yeah, animals are totally sensory-based. And then you've got, then there's some verbal thinkers, don't even think an animal can think because they don't have words. But I just read a brand new paper in Nature with brain scans, and it shows mathematical thought can be totally done in the absence of language.
Really?
Yeah. And then they had another thing where the visual cortex is all lit up. They're talking about mentalizing. Mm-hmm. Well, that's visual thinking. The visual cortex is all turned on in the brain. Wow. And the language for things like visualization and mathematics, you don't need language. You need language to think in words. If you think in words, then you're going to need language for that. But when you get into discussions about whether an animal is conscious or not, maybe if you think in words, it's hard to imagine. But since I think in pictures...
And they're processing all what they're seeing.
But then you also have the smells, and you have touch sensations, and it's all sensory. And then you've got certain sounds. Let's say the sound of the tractor means feed's coming. Then that's a good thing. But maybe this four-wheeler that you chased them with, they hear that. In fact, on one ranch, one four-wheeler is good, three's trouble. The cattle made that distinction.
One may be bringing them
that's right.
something, but three is herding them.
Three's herding them, that's right.
All right. Well, this is fascinating, and we can talk for a long, long time, Dr. Grandin. Anything else you want to leave us with?
Well, right now I'm, really like talking to the people today. We still have a need to talk about basics in animal handling. I also want to encourage students who think differently. We need their skills. As I travel around, elevators are not getting serviced. And there's a relationship between that and classrooms screening out the visual thinkers that'd be super good at fixing those elevators.
All right. That's true. That's true. Well, this is it for Tim's Take. We're so glad that Dr. Grandin came to talk to us, and we learned so much about not only livestock, but also ourselves.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. This is it for Tim's Take, and we'll see you next time.